Danny, welcome to the Feed Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's so great to have the opportunity to chit and chat again. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
You and I first met in the summer. I think it was not too long after you had first arrived both to Canada and the new gig. And boy, my impression of you right off was so much energy, a lot of curiosity. And I'm like, I wonder if that's how long that's going to last for. But I have to say, you and I were together at the Royal Fair yesterday, and the enthusiasm, it is part of your DNA. So it's such a treat to get you on the mic.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been 9 months now in Canada, and I think I've got even more enthusiasm now than when I arrived.
Well, fantastic. And you've experienced our winter. That was it. It snowed once and now it's gone. And
I really hope that's the case.
It is. We're recording this in November, and we had this sudden snow in the GTA, and now it's gone again, and
Yep.
kind of normal.
And that's it. Everyone tells me there's no more snow. It's all done.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's quite the tale. If we were in Calgary, that definitely would not be in Saskatchewan. But it will make its return. Actually,
Yes.
let's perhaps just before Christmas we'll get a bit of a white
Hopefully,
Christmas.
that would be nice.
So you and I obviously know each other a little bit, but tell the listeners who you are and what you do for a living.
Yeah, well, my name's Danni Peirce, and I joined Loblaw this year as their Chief Sourcing Officer. And so what that means is that I'm responsible for everything that Loblaw buys. So all of the food products, all of the health and beauty products, and then all of the goods not for resale as well. So essentially, nearly everything that we would buy would go through my team.
Which, by the way, is a massive remit.
Which is huge.
It's a big remit. To have even both sides, the B2B side is a big remit as well. So that ladders down to what do we call them here, the buyers or the merchants? Does that all kind of ladder up in a way to your
It does.
your role?
It does. So we have a team of sourcing managers and directors that form part of my team, and they're working across all those different categories, and then working hand in hand with our divisions, whether that's Shoppers Drug Mart, whether that's our discount banners, or whether that's our supermarket banners.
You've put on a lot of kilometers going coast to coast. I've been following you. You're tremendous energy. We're gonna talk about that a little bit more. But you had early observations when you first got here. They were just forming. I'm not even sure you had your house yet. You've traveled across this country. What are your observations? It's so interesting because your background. I think you've traveled or worked in more places than I've even traveled to. So you're really a global citizen. So I don't know how much you knew about Canada before you got here, or what's been your experience, and has anything surprised you after being here? 9 months?
I think it's been amazing. Canada is such a beautiful country and so diverse. And really, as I've been traveling around and seen different parts of Canada, that's the big thing that you see is the diversity and even the diversity in terms of seasons.
Right. You ain't seen nothing yet, by the way.
I know. Everyone keeps telling me, but it's even in the time that I've been here, and the challenges that creates for our suppliers, and then just the sheer size of Canada to sit on a plane. And get to some parts of Canada is like flying halfway around the world.
Well, from where we are today, if you were to drive north, you could drive 12, 14 hours and still be in the same province.
Yeah,
right?
unbelievable.
It is a vast nation. I've often described it as, in the context of business, a bit of a diseconomy of scale sometimes, because we were a vast nation, but, thinly populated and with lots of folks clustered in major cities and along the border. So, but many, many people living all over the country, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. So I think that's seeing that firsthand has been amazing, and particularly when I'm out and about seeing suppliers, it's amazing to see how they respond to that and how they adapt to that. Yeah, within Canada, it's amazing.
Well, and it does lend, people say, what's the Canadian consumer like? And there's no such thing, right? There's many, many, many. And that is very true. And whether we were talking in the United States or Europe or even within countries, there's no one consumer.
Definitely not.
So different and so diverse from coast to coast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this visiting of the vendors thing you do. So, you've got a very, very big remit. How do you conceptualize that? And what's your animating principle to doing that and going out to see all the vendors, and how do you organize that, and what's your operating principle, and what do you get from that?
Yeah, well, ever since I've been in retail, which is sort of over 20 years now, it's always been a principle of mine that I want to get out from outside of the office and I want to see stores, and I want to spend time with our store teams and hear from them in terms of what's working, what's not working. And then the same thing with our suppliers, because having a meeting with a supplier for an hour in the office, there's only so much that you can understand and learn and share. And when you go out to see a supplier and walk the field or walk the facility and meet the teams, it builds up a very different partnership. It builds up a very different understanding, and there are so many ideas that come out when you do these visits that you would never get if you were just having a meeting in the office. And so I try and carve out as much time as I can for those two things, to get out and meet with our store teams, and then to get out and see our suppliers. And it's also important from my perspective to see a spectrum of suppliers. So I'll spend time with some of our biggest suppliers.
Sure.
But also some of our smallest suppliers, because the challenges that our small suppliers have got are very different typically to the challenges of our biggest suppliers. And so, I try and see a real spectrum of them so I can get the best understanding I can.
Well, we're going to talk about the small supplier program a little later because it's very intriguing. But when I think it provides you context for things like line reviews, right? Do you participate? Like, what's the balance of your time spent? Is it you sit with the merchants and do big line reviews, category reviews? That alone must, how do you approach that? You've obviously got a lot of skilled people who are overseeing each category, but how do you pop into random ones? Do you pick, well, this one's doing really well and this one needs some help? Like, how do you prioritize?
I typically leave that to the teams to work through the categories. And so my sort of way of operating is to set a framework in which this is how we can best operate. These are the priorities. These are the things that are important to our customers, and set that framework. And then my kind of leadership philosophy is, if this is the framework, then you've got the freedom to make the decisions you need to within that, because I don't have the capacity to sit in hundreds of category meetings. We're such a huge business that there's no way that I would be able to do that.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the questions I had written down, but I kind of finessed it a little better, was how on earth do you do your job? Like, it's, you don't have any more hours in your day than I or anyone else. So it's really a real skill about that, setting an operating principle and setting the direction for the team, right? I mean, that really is the unlock for being effective in your role. Yeah?
It is. I mean, there is no possible way that I don't think anyone else could get into that level of detail. And so, but when I'm spending time with suppliers, that's one of the ways that I learn so much, is because when they're sharing their views of the category and the industry and the market, and sharing global insights, you can learn so much from those sessions. And so whether it's attending conferences, so that you get that high level understanding, and then that can help feed through.
That mix of hearing from the big picture to walking a kilometer in their shoes, kind of, so to speak.
Exactly.
In the farms or wherever. Let's talk about, as your role, what are your top priorities in your role as you report or as you work in the infrastructure? How do you look at Canadian global sourcing, and how do you think about the role of Canada, and how do you think about, a very global company you source globally? So what are your kind of top three priorities as you approach your role? Yeah.
So it's been an interesting year, hasn't it, this year? And probably the biggest year, or from a sourcing perspective, the biggest year of disruption that I can
You're welcome
think
to Canada.
Of. Yeah, I know. What a time to join.
Yeah, what a time to join.
And so, but it's a good time to join, because when you've had so much disruption, it forces you to think about, well, how do we make sure that we're best set up for the future? And so if I think about our priorities, so one is, we've got a big core of the business that we need to support, and obviously millions of customers and Canadians are reliant on us. And so, you've got kind of the core, the business as usual, which is we've got to make sure we've got the right quality, the right supply, the right availability. And and the right cost, and that's very much about partnering with our suppliers. And so that's kind of, like the base priority.
That's your foundation.
That's our foundation. Then we've got this piece around resilience and continuity is how we've talked about it. And that is so critical in terms of our supply chain and having this end-to-end resilience. And actually, I think it's been a great opportunity for Canada and Canadian suppliers this year, because obviously there was a huge customer sentiment around made in Canada and Canadian growers and Canadian suppliers, and that's been fantastic. And
I've never seen anything like it. I've been operating here for I was with the Hudson's Bay Company, RIP Hudson's Bay Company, but and we would have executives come in from international executives and say, "This must be amazing for you. You're a Canadian company. The customers must love you." And we're like, it doesn't make that much of a difference here and there. It certainly doesn't make a price point difference. But we had something different happen when you arrived, basically the same timing. And I kind of look at it, I want to get your feedback on this. I kind of look at it like a broomstick and the bicycle wheel of habit. And these things shall pass. Everything kind of passes. We learned that from COVID, right? Don't jump at shadows. Things will sort themselves out. But it did something I thought that is super, super hard for anybody, and that's change a consumer habit and even change the way you touched on, even the way you and the team looked at buying and sourcing. You kind of get in you're like, very good at it, right? You're moving tonnage of product, and we did things the way we did things, and they work out pretty well. Yeah. Do you think of it in the same way?
I do. I absolutely do. And if we look at the suppliers that we onboarded this year, 80% of the suppliers that we've onboarded have been Canadian. And so we've really lent into that because that's what our customers were looking for.
Yeah.
And what we have seen is obviously during the tariffs and at the peak when everything was happening, we saw huge growth in Canadian products. We have seen that now starting to soften.
Moderate a bit.
Yeah, sure. Moderate a bit. And obviously you've got the tariffs that have come off, so the American products have reduced now in price. And so that's had an impact. But the underlying sentiment is, I believe is still there in terms of the desire to want to buy Canadian and support Canadian. And so we've really, really lent into that. And so it's been over 200 Canadian suppliers this year. And which is fantastic. But then at the same time, we've always sourced globally because obviously there are many products that you can't buy in Canada, whether it's produce, whether it's groceries, whether it's health and beauty products.
Apparel,
exactly.
Some made here, hard goods, or whatever. There's a long list of things that are not made here. And in fact, a long list of things that are not made in the United States and elsewhere. Yes. It is really global. I think my last concluding thought on that is at the end of the day, this has been a ginormous, you couldn't buy it in any way, shape, or form, sampling opportunity for new brands.
Yes.
Right, particularly Canadian brands. And I think that's been one of the lasting, I know there's many brands I've tried that I may not have, just from habit, tried before, right?
Exactly. And we've seen really amazing examples where we had American products that went up significantly in price with tariffs, and we had Canadian alternatives. And the sales on those spiked hugely. But what we're seeing now is in some of these categories, when the tariffs come off and the prices readjust, but the growth is still there because customers have formed a new habit and they've discovered, they tried something different to what they've tried before, and that's great.
Well, and the number one guiding principle, I think, for Canadians remains, or maybe if it was a little different when you got here, but it's certainly affordability, right? And
absolutely.
It is certainly, I'm sure it's a guiding principle or animating principle for you and the team is ultimately, Canadians are very, very concerned about affordability, and you've got to do the best to kind of deliver that value.
Yeah, absolutely. And now more than ever, because it's so tough for so many Canadians right now. Yeah.
Now, you've worked globally extensively. So talk about this, how you perceive the global network of moving goods and finding and sourcing goods. As a change since you started your career, you've worked, as I said, you've worked around the world. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the course of your career?
I wouldn't. Have I seen a significant? I don't know that I've seen a significant change. Every retailer that I've worked for has always had I would say a balance of sourcing locally or domestically versus globally sourcing. I think you see an evolution in in which countries are really strong in different categories. And so if we think over the last 15 or 20 years where clothing is made, there are new countries who've come in.
I think of Vietnam, for example.
Exactly.
It was not really on many radar screens a decade ago, and now is a big point for a variety of Mexico. So there's been a lot of change in that perspective.
Yeah, and electronics, there's been a lot of change in that. I'd say from a food perspective, it would be more stable. It's more the diversity of our customers here in Canada, which has, so, if I think about our multicultural ranges, we've seen tremendous growth in those, and we are therefore sourcing different brands from different countries to how we would have sourced before, because our range has to reflect our customer base, which has changed significantly in Canada over the past 10, 15 years. And so here in Canada, that would be the biggest change that we've seen.
So I mentioned earlier we were together briefly, and I did some great interviews that you've already heard, listeners, and you'll hear more of them at the Small Supplier event. I guess we had a pop-up studio or a pop-up booth with a fun trailer at the Royal Agricultural Fair here in Toronto, which is just a big pile of fun, right?
Amazing, right? Rodeos, cows,
like in the middle of the city.
Show jumping.
Where did all this come from?
It was amazing.
So let's talk about that program. And sometimes I think about business in terms of a context of need to do and like to do, table stakes and differentiators. And it feels like, the program like that, it's not new that grocers would look or retailers would look to small suppliers for things like innovation. Yeah. Because they tend to be a font of innovation.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So that's nothing new. Where does it fit in, and how do you think you can make a difference or make it a differentiator, your approach to small vendors?
Yeah. Well, I think for us, our small supplier program is something that Loblaw is incredibly proud of. And we know that when dealing with a retailer the size of Loblaw and the complexity can be really tough when you're a small supplier, you're just starting out, you're learning how retail works. And so trying to work out how to approach or speak with or deal with
how to get a meeting, how to knock on the door, how to get product to you.
Exactly. I mean, that's very overwhelming. And so the small supplier program was all about helping our small and emerging suppliers to bridge that gap between themselves and ourselves. And to your point, is it kind of table stakes? Well, it's a must do for us. But I think the important piece is having the substance behind it. And that's what we've been really focused on. And so we know for small suppliers that cash flow is number one. And so that's why we have 7-day payment terms for all of our small suppliers. And
7 days.
7 days, which is amazing and, very much, I know, appreciated from having spent time with a lot of them.
Who had that meeting with accounts payable that they're going to have to pay to assist in it? You're not going to have to pay it 7 days.
Exactly. So, and then, it was actually through spending time with some of our small suppliers that they were feeding back, well, the thing that would make a real difference for us is to be able to see data of how our products are selling, because we're in one store, then we might be in 10 stores, but we don't know how much we're selling in these different stores. We don't know if we do a demo, what impact that's having on sales.
Load in versus throughput, always a bit of a, I know the stores are filled, but where is it moving and how and when?
Exactly. So we have the most amazing data at Loblaw. And so now for free, we provide that to all of our small suppliers so they can see exactly how their products are performing. And then we do great events. The Royal Winter Fair was one great example. And we've, there's lots that we've done in the past. There's lots more that we're doing as well. So that our small suppliers, it helps them to be able to tell the amazing stories that they've got in terms of how these businesses started and
they're all so amazing, right?
Amazing.
We've had every time I interview it, sometimes it's the intersection of the personal and professional. I think a lemonade, she's like, I need to find a cleaning thing that's good for my kids. Yep. Other times it's just like, there's got to be a better pretzel in the world. And I the boldness, the ambition is always impressive to me. It's like, we're talking about Twigs, who's been on the pod, and how do you get in your head, you're 3 people sitting in Calgary, that you're going to take on one of the biggest snack categories in the world and win in some way? Yep. And then actually get a meeting with grocers and actually say, listen, I got a pretzel that you're going to be interested in, they probably, buyers get a lot of questions and they have a lot of people. So if back to the small supplier program, so one pillar is the payment terms.
Yes.
Another pillar is the information that you convey with them. What are the other, the get listed, you're obviously, I guess another pillar is you build engines or mechanisms to profile their brands under an umbrella of Loblaw.
We do.
What else makes it different?
And then we have a small supplier team who basically become the link between our small suppliers and the rest of the organization. And so they are the ones who are helping them to navigate and doing that navigation for them. And so that makes a really significant difference. And so yesterday, in fact, I was talking to a couple of the small suppliers there about their experience, and that's one of the things that they called out has made the biggest difference for them, because otherwise it's just it's too complex. They don't know where to go, and so that's made a huge difference.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're like the Sherpas that help them. There's probably a number of people overseeing a snack category or a cleaning category, and they're kind of the middleware, if I could use a technology.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is that we've now got our first small suppliers who are graduating to be medium-sized suppliers. And so Spring Hills Fish is a supplier that I went to see a few weeks ago, and they've just graduated they were the first ones to graduate from being small to medium. And that's really...
And what does that mean? Obviously, there's some volume implications, but what does that mean in a practical... And why should they should obviously aspire to it because it means more business, but do they lose that connection to the program, or they just they're more sophisticated?
Yeah, they're more sophisticated. They've got a bigger team, and then we can start to look at other opportunities with them. So, could we look at control brand with them? Could we look at how they can leverage more of our data and our digital
Loblaw
services?
Advantage, maybe.
Exactly.
That kind of
so
stuff,
it opens up the door, because by then their business is large enough that they can start to look at other opportunities with us.
And is that both a time and a volume measure? In other words, it's not going to happen in a week.
Just
volume.
Just volume.
Right on. Let's talk for just a few minutes about technology and what you do. And what are we now? 22 minutes in, we haven't said AI yet. So a bit of a record lately. But when I think about your job and the sourcing role, I think about a bunch of different technologies that are making a huge, huge difference. One of which is the predictive power of AI. I think about IoT devices, these RFID devices that can help track and measure things. And what else comes to your mind, and how do you see your job from a technologist perspective being enabled a little bit differently? I'm probably excited about the potential for better forecasting with AI, but there's likely more to it than that.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. I've had 2 sessions this week on AI, and Loblaw is doing some amazing things. We have an in-house AI team who, like a roving team, who come and embed themselves, and we self-build various different applications, and so that's really exciting. And so they've already worked with us on one major project, which is around commodities and commodity tracking, and how do we better track commodities at scale so that we can have ebbs and flows in cost to make sure that our costings are reflecting what's happening with commodities. So that's the first major change that we've made, which has been really exciting. But we've really just scratched the surface so far. So there's lots more that we want to do to build on that.
I've talked to executives who they're cautious because they say, well, let's make sure we're solving a problem, not using AI or whatever technology is for its own sake. So, start with the problem, or start with why, as someone once said, right? Is that something that, do you have a whiteboard in your office? If only I could do the following things, maybe AI could help, and they kind of, okay, here's the team that comes in.
Yeah, so that's what we are doing now. So we've done the first pilot, big success, and so now it's right, what are the next priorities? And the way that I like to think about it, and I was talking to our chief digital officer, and she said this to me actually, and she said, think about it, how do you have 10 times more people in your team? Because that's what an AI, if you do it in the right way on the right problems, can unlock. And imagine all the things we could do if we had 10 times more people.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that we're trying to think about it, is if to say, what problems can we solve that means that our teams could be 10 times bigger, more productive.
Right.
And then
And that the people, again, I've heard it said that it frees up the people out of rote kind of mechanical
exactly.
and really get more value out. Same amount of people just doing different roles.
Exactly.
That they can focus more on strategy or just, it's that qualitative and quantitative mix, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, more time on action and execution versus trying to pull numbers or find data, and that would be amazing.
Well, let's hope. Let's talk about sustainability. So it's a big objective, remains a big objective. And when I think of sustainability, I think of there's a lot of technical elements to sustainability, rules and regulations and how you operate. But then I think there's the kind of sustainability and ESG in the kind of world of sourcing. And how do you position that? Not position that, but how do you think about that in your role?
Yeah. So there's a few sort of major aspects that we look at that. One of them is around sustainability in terms of ingredients and animal welfare. So that's something that we really take a lead on. And then we've got packaging, and particularly plastics at the moment is a really big focus for us. And then, of course, the last piece is carbon and the carbon journey that we're on. So they would be sort of the
three big pillars, right?
The three big pillars.
Well, you move a lot of things, right? So I saw Galen Weston present in a conference in Vancouver, and he was on a global task force around, this is certainly not a Canadian issue, but everyone's trying to get there at the same time and solve these bigger problems. That food safety versus packaging, there's still, there's wonderful elements to food safety that just need to be in place. But I mean, you can really get at it in terms of thinking about, so does it drive decisions for you? Is it, do you have metrics on a year-over-year basis, whatever they may be, carbon reduction or reduction in packaging and those kind of things?
We do. We have sort of holistic goals that we want to achieve, and then we break those down. And so, for example, this year we said that we want all control brand and in-store packaging to be able to follow the plastics golden design rules. So essentially to be recyclable or recycled, and this year we're going to achieve that, and that's a big step forward for us, and that really requires partnership with suppliers, and so that's a great example of one where we said, right, this is where we want to be, and we've made it happen. Now we're going to do it with national brand suppliers, so that's the next hill to climb,
the next level.
Exactly.
Well, you won't be the first person to call, but
no.
everyone is kind of, whether it's legislative or whether it's just because the customer cares about it, you're going there anyway.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears. Last couple of questions about advice. So you've had so far a super interesting career. You've led organizations. Now you're leading one of the most important components of Loblaw. So what's your advice in terms of how you what would be your advice to people who aspire to do what you do for a living, or just become a fantastic executive, whether it's retail or other industry?
Well, I start off by saying, I feel so lucky to have the role that I do, because for me, working in retail, I think I love it more today than I even did when I first started. So, I feel like I found an industry that I'm so passionate about, and so it never feels hard to come to work. Like I love my job. I love what I do. And if I think back about, well, what's made the difference and what advice would I give? I think there were two experiences that I look back on that I value the most, and one is working in stores. So when I first started in retail, I first started with Tesco in the UK, and I'd never worked in retail before. And so I spent my first few months working in Tesco Extra in Stevenage. And that was the most amazing experience, because you see everything live. All the decisions that are being made in the head office. Somewhere else. Yeah. You see the good, you see the bad, you see the ugly. You experience it firsthand. And so even now, 20 years on, I still think back to my experiences there, because you just learn so much by being out on the shop floor and with customers. So that's, to me, critical experience if you want to work your way up in retail. And then the other role that I think is really critical is being a category manager and owning and running a category, because you've got a framework, you've got a budget, and then you've got the freedom within that to do what you need to do to meet your customers' needs. And you've got to understand your customer inside out, and then you've got to work with suppliers, you've got to work with partners to be able to deliver something that is going to win with customers. And you see your results instantly. You know whether you've done a great job and you know whether you've done a terrible job, because as soon as you land something, customers will tell you with their wallets whether you've done a good job or not. So when I look back, they're the two experiences that I think have made a huge difference in terms of my career.
As you think about building a high-performance team, what are the personality traits you look for? I remember I had a long conversation with a guy named Dan Pink, who's written extensively on this, and I said, what's that one interview question that if you only had one question to ask in an interview, what would it be? And he said, do you consider yourself lucky? And he said, it tells you a lot about someone. And they're like, no, I didn't win the lottery yesterday, or, I've never won a big prize. Alternatively, I was born in affluence in in America or Canada or wherever. Do you have one of those things that when you interview or you look for talent, and how do you think about that?
I think the thing that I look for when I interview is the ability to be able to work well with others, collaborate and build trust. Because when you work in an organization this size, whether it's internal with team members or whether it's external working with suppliers and partners, you have to be able to work so well with others. Otherwise, you have no chance of any success. And we're a matrix organization, and so you're working across different hierarchies, different teams, and
you've got to be comfortable with that, right?
You've got to be comfortable with that.
It's a big machine. I've heard it sometimes described as, you're a cog in a big machine. You're an important cog, and if you took that cog away, some part of the machine's not going to work. But you have to realize you work in a large machine, and your actions affect other people. But the machine doesn't work without it all working in the same direction. And
I think to that point, it's very easy when you work in any big organization to become a cog in the machine, where you can look back, you can get to Friday afternoon and you think, I was so busy this week. And then you can look back and you can think, well, what did I do?
Yeah.
And so my advice actually, when I catch up with some of our more junior team members, is to say, look, pick 3 to 5 things that are the things that are going to, the legacy that you're going to leave behind. Like, what are the things that are going to make a big difference? And write them down and pin them on the back of your desk. And because often you'll find if you do that, you'll get to Friday afternoon and you'll look and you've been so busy, but you may not have contributed to any of those things. And so you've got to stay really focused on the big priorities, the things that are going to move the needle, because there's business as usual stuff that you have to do because you've got to keep the business.
Got to put numbers on the wall. Got to put the numbers up on the board.
Yeah. But they're not the things that move the needle for customers or store teams. And so that's something that's seen me through well, and something that's always stuck with me.
Or for your career, right? I mean, the challenge is we're all so busy, and you've got numbers to put up on the board, and you can kind of lose track of, what are those kind of key elements that you need to do to move and aspire to a role such as yours. So I think my observation of you is you have tremendous curiosity. Like you're just very curious. I think that's a very important skill for executives. They just need to be just really curious about how things work and why things are done the way they're done, or what can be done different, right? A little bit of curiosity, resilience, agility. I mean, in a short. Advice for vendors. So there's likely existing prospective vendors. You have this wide remit between services and goods. So maybe a little hard to pin down simple advice. But I think many retailers know how to work with retailers, but I always see, again, this difference between table stakes and differentiators. There will be a cluster of vendors that will do fine. Yeah. You will do fine business together. But then there's a cluster of vendors that really differentiate themselves and really grow. What's your tip to the vendor supplier community in terms of being in that second category? Yeah.
I think it's it's probably a bit cliche to say it, but the suppliers who are laser focused on the customer and meeting customer needs and staying close to customers are the ones where we see the biggest success. So that would be the first point. And then when you're working with a retailer, understanding their priorities and where they are growing their business, and then thinking through, well, how can I fit my plans
Right.
into that, and what platforms or what assets do they have that I can push on to be able to help grow my business. And I think it's the suppliers who are really able to identify that. And come at it from a customer perspective, that are the ones that get the double-digit growth as opposed to the low single-digit growth.
And even when you're the customer, right? So on the business-to-business side, understanding what problems or I've had many executives have told me, I don't particularly like it when someone says, "What's keeping you up at night?" I'd rather have that meeting where I come in and said, "Here's what I do. Here's what I think you need. I think there's a fit here, and here's how I think we can grow our business together." Is that good advice?
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and I think being curious. So often supplier meetings will start with the suppliers asking us, can you just. This is what we've heard before. Is there anything else that we're missing? Is there anything else that's changed? And that's always very helpful, so that we get that out on the table, and then as they're sort of sharing their plans, they're adjusting to anything that may have changed from our perspective. And it means if we've got those kind of shared plans, shared objectives, it's much easier to identify ways that we can partner together and really drive growth, because that's what we all want.
Right.
That's what we all want.
Fantastic. Well, Danni, it's such a treat to sit down and have a long conversation with you.
And with you.
Welcome to Canada.
Thank you.
It's
so happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here, and I'll keep an eye on your journeys across as you crisscross our nation, experience our fourth season of winter. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, once again, thanks for joining me on the feed, and continued success.
Thank you so much. Thank you.